Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Jenelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety. I'm so thrilled to welcome you here to this Q&A with Olympic Dreams. At this time, please join me in welcoming the filmmakers who brought this movie to life. They've previously collaborated as co-writers on the films EverQuest Forever and Tracktown, both of which he directed and she also starred in. Please join me in welcoming Alexi Pappas and Jeremy Teicher.
Hello.
Thank you guys so much for being here. Before I get started, I just want to we're going to be taking audience questions tonight because I know you probably couldn't write any before the movie. So if you want to start mulling on thoughts now, we're going to do it a little differently and I will call on the audience for a change. Anyway, back to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on a beautiful movie. I always like to start by kind of asking people what their first job was in this business, but I think you two have had very different paths because you really were an Olympic athlete.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. How did
Summer
you?
Olympian.
How did How did acting and writing find its way to you?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, I think I identified as like a performer before I was an Olympian. In college, I was the worst on my team when I first started, and there were several instances where my whole team was brought to a race, and some of us were not on the travel team. And during those downtimes, I found improv theater in college and also creative writing, and so I feel like during the time when I wasn't able to contribute as an athlete yet, I found my way in the creative space through improv and through poetry. And then the running slowly had legs. That career had legs of its own, my legs. And then I followed that actually with advice from creative advisors who were like, there's a unique window of time when you can pursue an Olympic dream, and I recognized that. And I also trusted that it would support my creative pursuits. And I think it really did, because Jeremy and I moved to Oregon, and we were determined to make the most of that time where I was running in this place. And we made our movie Tracktown there. And so I think now I'm starting to come back to the arts as the more focal point of my life, but it was sort of like a running sandwich with creative on either end, and hopefully many more pieces of bread on the end that has yet to be built.
Not too much bread, maybe some meat and lettuce and tomato in there. Sure. And Jeremy, you kind of took a more traditional path. You did study filmmaking. In fact, you were nominated for a Student Academy Award.
Yes. So we met in undergrad too. And we're married also.
Oh yeah, during that downtime, I also went to parties.
We should all know everything. So but when we first met, I'll just brag about Alexi for another minute, and then I didn't even know that she was a runner, because it was you weren't really running at a serious level for almost the first year and a half of college. So I just knew you as the improv person, and I'd seen she wrote a play that they did in the theater department, which I was studying in. So yeah, I studied English and film. At Dartmouth, there was it was more of a film theory department. So I did a combined major and studied theater and took acting, because that was just the only way to really be hands-on with the craft that I would eventually be doing. But I always knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, so I thought of myself as a spy in the acting classes. So then I made a short doc in my senior year, which was nominated for the award. And then my first feature was a blend of fiction and reality like this, except this was, with Alexi and Nick, they're trained actors, but with my first film, it was the subjects of the documentary acting as fictionalized versions of themselves, which when that movie came out in 2012, that movement was still pretty new, and now it's, I feel part of the fabric of indie filmmaking. So that was, and then we moved to Oregon when Alexi was training for the Olympics and made Tracktown, and now we're here.
Wait, tell people the names of these movies so they can track them down.
Okay, so my first movie is called Tall as the Baobab Tree. It's not in English. Grand comme le baobab is the title, and it's a West African film. So I had traveled to Senegal in college with a group and met this group of students who were my same age, but they were the first from their families to ever go to school. So we made it doc together, and then I got a grant to go back and after I graduated, and that became the first movie, which played the festival circuit and got distribution and paved the way towards Tracktown.
Wait, do you speak the language?
I speak French.
Okay.
So, but the movie's actually not in French. It's in the language that's spoken more colloquially called Pular, which I didn't understand. So we had a translator.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is your first movie.
That was my first. Yeah.
Jeremy had the opportunity to go to some great grad schools for film, and he decided not to go because he felt that his resources and his time were better spent making a movie. And so Tall as the Baobab Tree was his education in a way.
And I wanted you to pronounce the name of the movie because I was afraid I'd butcher it. Right. I have it written down here phonetically, but I was like, you just tell us the name. And Tracktown, from what I understand, in addition to having fans like, I believe Paul Thomas Anderson saw it on a plane and was a fan. And it was somebody from the Olympics who saw it and actually came to you with the idea for this movie?
So that's correct about Paul, and it's meant a lot to us because I think Jeremy and I are the types that, I mean, one, we've really built the things that we've had from, our imaginations to reality. And so to have like mentors like that who believe in us really has given us permission to keep going. And I think we continue to always seek out being around greatness, like whether it's seeing great movies or just trying to be in the space with people who inspire us, because there's an energy there and it's really positive. So that meant a lot to us. And then, yes, so the president of the Olympics saw Tracktown also on an airline, and he reached out to us because there's this artist in residency program that started in Rio, and the Olympics really wanted to bring back the arts to the Olympics, which has always been important for the Olympics. And he asked if we wanted to do a film project in the village, and it was such a privilege because nobody's ever created a fictional movie inside, the dining hall and all the places that we saw tonight together. And we were set out to go and make a series of short films. That's what the Olympics thought might be feasible, but Jeremy and I are very ambitious people. And with, of course, the support of the Olympics, we captured, and Nick Kroll, we captured the feature. And so that's how it came about. But it started out with just those permissions, and that was huge.
I mean, so you're the first people who have ever had access, first fictional film, right?
Correct. Like
Wow.
There's always cameras. Like as an Olympian, you're used to cameras everywhere, but that it was a fictional movie was really new. And even those like media cameras are not allowed like in dorm rooms and in some of the places that we were allowed. And I think, we respected everyone's space, and they knew as an Olympian I would respect the spirit, of the place, and it was really fun.
Did people know you were making a movie, or did they just think you were media?
It's funny. Jeremy pointed out that like a lot of people just ignored us because they're there to compete in their Olympics.
Yes.
They don't care
But
about us.
they did think we were media. Like we were not
Yeah.
the only camera situation that was around. We were definitely the only people there making a narrative feature. But that was nice in that people didn't it didn't disrupt any situation when we were filming. And also, I mean, it was just me with the camera, and often with a long lens. So
Jeremy was the director, cinematographer, and did sound as a one-man band. He had like a huge, I feel like this is the right community to share that with, because sometimes we've shared it and I don't know if people understand like just what a physical Olympic feat that was, Jeremy.
Says an Olympian.
Yeah. So much so that we had to befriend the chiropractor from the USA bobsled team to help put Jeremy back together regularly.
Yeah, it was necessary because I had shall I describe the rig?
Sure, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was the Sony Eva 1 or Panasonic Eva 1, which is like a kind of like, cost wasn't the limiting factor with shooting this. We knew we would only have 3 people, and even that was because originally the invitation was for the 2 of us to come and do a project, and honestly like the initial thought was something with cell phones. then we go, what if we made a fiction feature film? And obviously that is not possible, but we eventually progressed things to where we were allowed to bring a third person. So that informed what the story was going to be. So we did, what could we make? And so 2 films that now I'm going off on like a long tangent,
that's
but
fine.
like 2 films that came to mind were Lost in Translation and the Before, Linklater's Before series. So that informed the story, and then we knew we would have the Olympics as the backdrop. So I knew it was going to be just me. So I used a monopod with a shoulder rig thing that we built on. We spent like probably 2 months ahead of time designing the rig. I worked with my sound designer, and some techs from Panasonic actually helped us do it with, like, the camera was here, and then we had a sync sound bag slung across this side of my body, and it was like jam synced, it's called, with like this wiring so they could wear lavs, and then we had an extra floating lav to like put on the athletes we'd pull in, and then there was an onboard mic, but it was like heavy.
What about lighting? Did you just use available light?
Mostly available light, and then I had these things called
those magnetic.
they're magnetic. They're like LED lights that you can they just look like LED lights within like an armor casing that's transparent with magnets on the back. So the only place I used it was in the dentist's office, actually. Luckily, those walls were like, the temporary walling that they used was metal, so I could just slap the lights on.
Oh, wow.
Other than that, though, just, natural.
I mean, it felt like, just watching this movie before I knew the background, you must have had an insider's view, because it would never even occur to me that a dentist, that this could be a character in a movie, that he would come over and be working on athletes. So, obviously that's where your background comes in really handy. How much is this based on your real experiences?
Yeah, I mean, when I went to Rio and competed, I thought one of the most surprising parts about it was that whole polyclinic setup. So every Olympics provides for the athletes like full medical support in the way of like contact lenses, glasses, dental checkups, medical checkups, what else? Mouth guards, all these tools. And for a lot of the athletes, for some athletes at least, this is the only access they have to healthcare. And I thought that, one, that was really eye-opening to me, that for some of these athletes, the competition really mattered, but the other opportunities at the Olympics also really mattered. And the Ezra character in particular was inspired by a doctor that befriended me in the gym. And I, of course, was with Jeremy, and it did not become an Ezra and Penelope situation, but it did like spark that character of this volunteer. Why is this guy here? Why did he take this month to be here? When, what does this mean to him? And there are so many volunteers that help with the Olympics, and it was really fun to put a spotlight on that side of it.
Wait, are they really volunteers, or do they get paid for their work?
They're volunteers.
Wow, that's amazing.
And there's no shortage of people who would like to do that. It's like you're peeking inside this world that until this movie came out, you could never really see, So it was very, Ezra is possible.
Yeah. At what point did Nick Kroll get involved, and how did you get him involved? Did you know him at all?
No, we didn't know him prior to this. We actually had a casting director, for one role. But it was important because, there was like a rough age range. We wanted Ezra to be of a certain age range, and the main other criteria was basically, he's going to be one person in a 3-person team. So this is going to need to be someone who is not going to be daunted by utter chaos, and someone who could trust that we would know that would that would have a good creative relationship with us and have good chemistry with Alexi. That's something that I kind of looked at, but also even just as important was someone who would be okay being in this pretty intense situation for like 3.5 weeks. So it was kind of from that like unusual set of criteria, it was, I think, a pretty straightforward process of getting at people's availabilities and finding our favorite few and writing letters. And the way that we got to Nick was because his agent Sharon Jackson at WME really, I think, connected with Tracktown, our previous film, and believed in our ability to pull this off, and just thought it was such a cool opportunity we had. I think we found that it was such a unique ask that it was really getting the agent to buy in and believe in it. And Nick actually wasn't on our casting director's original like outreach list, but his agent was like, Nick's definitely your guy.
Really?
Like, oh, okay. So we met with him, and within like minutes we knew.
Did you have a script to show him, or was it an outline? Or
It was an outline, a scriptment.
That we developed with him. So Nick
Yeah.
also has co-writing credit because there was so much, improvised dialogue and the script mint that we went in with, which was a very detailed outline. I think we all, Jeremy and I developed, and Nick definitely also played a huge role in.
I mean, Nick is one of the funniest people alive, honestly. Were you that familiar with his work, and how did you know he could pull off a dramatic role?
I was like, I'm a big comedy fan, so of course I knew who Nick was. I think just the initial we had one meeting, and it was also down to the wire. Like that, we were just getting security clearance for a third person to go like 3 weeks before, so like, it was a leap of faith for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think just talking to Nick about it,
yeah.
we just felt like, oh, he gets it, and also. We knew he was a guy who had been in charge of his own TV show, had a producerial eye and mind, and that was, that came really in handy, like having someone who truly felt like a teammate across the board, and just the way we spoke about the character, it was clear that he was plugged in, and I think his ability as an improviser, was so strong. I think you can most people use improv to create comedy, but you can also really use it in drama. It's just about really, really being present and listening and being on your toes. And then instead of making a comedy twist, just choosing to be like vulnerable, so I think like a lot of comedy actors or people from improv or stand-up backgrounds where you're almost like aggressively tuned in to what's going on around you. It takes a little bit of bravery in a different way to then kind of tone down the edge that creates the comedy, and instead just be, a little more vulnerable and natural, because then, you're opening yourself up. But Nick did a great job at that.
What was it like sharing scenes with him? Because he's a great actor, and you guys have really great chemistry.
It was so fun acting with Nick because he just like committed, and I think that's all you can ask in a scene partner, is someone who's willing to like go on that adventure with you, and to know that we were a team, because we had to find some of the emotional moments. Like we knew roughly what was going to happen in a scene, but how you get from point A to point B can be so many, or I guess point A to point D. There's a lot of like B's and C's in there. And so doing that with him was fun because I got to watch how he works and be in awe of it while doing it in the moment. So I really tried to like relish the experience of doing that with him because it felt very playful and very fun. And I felt very lucky to be able to do that with him.
Were people in the Olympic Village at all surprised to see him, or do you think they didn't know who he was?
Some people didn't know who he was, but a lot of people did. And I think the most fun story to share there is the amount of athletes that came up to Nick and expressed their gratitude for Big Mouth, his show, because athletes travel so much, and winter athletes in particular are always chasing snow. They're traveling like constantly, and it's very isolating. And so television and movies and books become very important to athletes, because sometimes you need to like have some time away from your teammates. And Big Mouth, I think, played like a role in their Olympic journey already. So it's sort of this moment of mutual awe of Nick to them to Nick that we kept experiencing. And that was really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah. And the other actors, I understand, they were actual athletes?
Every character in this movie besides Nick Kroll and the other volunteers are Olympians. And They were all there. There was only one person that we talked to ahead of time, which was the Gus character. Gus is an Olympian, but he also has an interest in acting, and we spoke to him ahead of time. He's so fantastic. But the other athletes, I would just walk around the village, and I know what an athlete looks like when they're about to compete, and I will not bother them. But there is a look that you have when you're done or wanting to discover and or you're bored or you're nervous. And so I would ask them if they wanted to come act in this movie, and we'd pull them into the dentist's office or wherever we were for 30 minutes. And I think they were all thrilled to have this like little sprinkle on their Olympic experience that they didn't expect.
That's so cool. Were all of them pretty good actors? Because the people we see are really good.
Yeah, I think Jeremy can speak to that as the director, but their athletes are good at being on camera, and they're even better at being like, I think, vulnerable and honestly themselves. But maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, so we never asked them. I think the key to working with untrained actors is to have them be themselves totally, and then you can kind of give a little bit of a circumstantial nudge, like, okay, your left tooth hurts, or you're gonna mess with Nick a little bit here. And then sometimes Nick would have more complicated directions, like you make them joke, like bring up this and joke about this, or with the dental scenes specifically, like I knew we were gonna have like a dentist montage here, and we're in Act 2, like this is the fun dentist montage, and then there's gonna be a couple dental appointments where Nick's in a bad mood, and I would kind of look at who Alexi was bringing in through the door and kind of make a quick decision. But yeah, like, giving pretty simple directions and then just letting them be themselves is great. You're going to get a great performance as long as the subject has an ability to just forget about the camera and ignore it and just engage with like Nick or with Alexi, which we've had pretty much all the athletes were able to do, because I think they're somewhat used to being around cameras, as opposed to my first film, where if there was a camera nearby, everyone got really on edge, not in a negative way, just
Sure.
not used to being recorded. So what I did there was use 2 cameras. And when you have 2 cameras on you, you're like, so you end up just focusing on the other people in the scene, and that was how to get a natural performance. Yeah. So, but in this case, we didn't need to use that trick, nor could we. So,
You guys must have a lot of really interesting outtakes.
From
This movie?
yeah, there's a lot of dental sequences that didn't make it, but surprisingly, like not that much on the cutting room floor. This wasn't like a spray and pray, which that kind of means like you're just trying to shoot as much as you can. Like we had a pretty tight like outline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did you know in advance like what locations you would be at? Because Nick's character kind of makes that joke when they're inside the stadium, like, well, we should get out of here before we're kicked out of here. And part of me wondered if there was some truth to that.
No. With that on the other side, there were like 2 or 3 venue managers there with us. So we received about a week out a list, like maps of the different like structure, things that there would be. And so what Alexi and I did was I had already made a spreadsheet of every scene, and we tried to mix it, like pair scenes with locations, and we would shoot out locations. So all the bedroom stuff, all the dining hall stuff was pretty much just done in big blocks. And then for certain scenes, like the argument, I think that it would be cool to get into the empty stadium, because we know that stadium sits empty between opening and closing ceremonies. And then we knew like it would be cool to get into a curling practice, a figure skating practice, then we'll see what else we can get into. And then we had one day before we started where I met with the venue manager, coordinator person. And so then we kind of learned what was actually going to be available to us. And on the fly, I adjusted the schedule. And then every day when we finished shooting, I would like take note of what we had shot, and I was constantly texting with the different venue location people and would update what was going to be available to us the next day. So it was kind of like a daily a nightly thing while the footage was being while I was backing it up. I was kind of like piecing together the next day.
That's so cool. I do want to take some questions from the audience. If you have one, raise your hand, and I'll just repeat it for the audience at home. Let's start right there. Oh, question about the festival and distribution.
Yes. So this movie premiered at South by Southwest in 2019, so this past year. And that was such a fun experience for us. They do such an amazing job there. It's like the most electric environment. So Jeremy and Nick and I loved being there. And then IFC bought the movie and is a really, really wonderful partner in this because they've had such experience with other films they've done and had such a vision for, bringing it to the world. Obviously, we've strategically the winter release for the winter movie, Valentine's Day.
Next week.
Yeah, it comes out on Valentine's Day. So that's what we're doing.
It's like New York and LA for Valentine's Day weekend, and then I think 30 other cities like the next week.
That's great.
But we hope people see in theaters because it feels like it captures that Olympic spirit.
Fun thing. So it's open. It's the Laemmle. Monica's the theater here, and we're doing a thing before the. So Nick, Alexi, and I are doing Q&As on Friday night, next Friday at the Laemmle, and then we're gonna do Q&As Saturday, Sunday night, and during the matinee. But also, I think if you come. Alexi will post on her social media, but there'll be like a group run. So if anyone wants to, like people can meet like at, I think noon, about an hour before at the theater. She'll do a run with people on the beach, then come back and we'll watch the movie. Yeah.
That is cool and ambitious. And
free coaching, so.
Ooh, from an Olympian.
There were two here.
Sure.
You mentioned South by Southwest. If I close my eyes, I can listen to the same cadence of Slacker. Remember Slacker?
Sure.
Oh, fuck. It was like that same cadence, which I think is fantastic. You hit that.
Thank you. No, Jeremy, for real. And yeah, that means so much to us.
Slacker's awesome, right?
Yeah.
Talking about the movie Slacker, which is also by Richard Linklater.
Yes.
Yeah, and Richard Linklater, we were so honored to have him at our premiere at South by, and he's done Q&As with us about the film, and he really has opened my eyes because as an athlete, he's a huge
baseball. He was a big
serious,
baseball player.
Very serious athlete, and like to see him like transition that career and create some, become a creative and have it really like matter that he was an athlete he's such a mentor to me and gives me a lot of hope that it will help that I was an Olympian when I am full on in the arts.
That's really cool.
Thank you. That really means a lot to us.
We have a question down here.
Yeah, I'm gonna do my question second. My little bit of praise and part kind of improv. Like, what was the ratio?
So, question about your scriptment and how much was written, how much was improv.
Yeah.
I would say that all the words were improvised and all of the beats were thoughtful.
Scripted, yeah.
Scripted. Does
Like,
that
yes.
answer that?
And then would you go back and do more takes and you could kind of get down what you wanted to say?
Yeah, we had a mentor named Nikki who helped us understand that it would be helpful to have some options. But I actually think that Jeremy and Nick and I did quite a bit of work ahead of time to get to know these characters so that whatever situation Ezra and Penelope were in, we knew how they would behave. And so if Jeremy, put us in a certain situation or in a certain place as a director, we knew to be Ezra and Penelope no matter what, to the point where actually all the interruptions are real. So Jeremy instructed us after a certain point to act until he said cut. And so when like people come into the dentist's office, that there was like an interruption, there's an interruption at the bus scene, those are all real because Nick was wearing a volunteer costume and that was a real functioning dentist office. So people needed to like do the Olympics, and so it actually really helped to have like such strong direction where we knew what we were supposed to do.
I think it was a combination of like we had done a lot of talking about the characters, so they were so grounded in that they were able to be nimble. And then I think, you know, they knew that I kind of had that Excel spreadsheet like in my head. So I, you know, if there was like, it wasn't that we were thinking on the fly, oh, it'd be cool to do a scene like this, let's shoot it. Like I knew what was needed, you know, in any moment. But there were also times when it's like a line, you know, they go to the ski jump and Penelope talks about how she wonders if, you know, she could never do this, and she wonders if other athletes could do that, could, you know, think the same about her. And that's what that would have been written as. And so then we get there and look at it and chat and just, you know, what happened, you know, you saw the scenes. So, but yeah, sometimes we would do one take and find certain little key lines of dialogue that we really liked, and do other takes more focused on that.
You could talk about the kiss if you want.
Yeah. So that's a good example. So, but yeah, there were no lines of actual dialogue really written out in advance, because like that wasn't really that wasn't where we could put our energy in terms of like memorizing things like that. It was more like they were generally familiar, or like pretty familiar with the arc of the story, and I knew exactly what needed to happen. So, but one thing that did totally change between our plan and what happened is the kiss. So originally they were meant to kiss in the stadium, like after they made up. But we shot that scene, and like and I tried to keep certain things in order as much as I could. So like they were supposed to kiss there, and it just didn't happen in the stadium scene. And I really loved the way that it ended. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. So then I thought maybe they would kiss when he goes to her dorm that night. But like it just didn't feel right. Like they didn't do it. Nick didn't do it. And I think we were just all knew like it couldn't happen right now. And so then we thought maybe it would happen in the dental checkup, but like again, it didn't happen. And so like I thought maybe now like there's not going to be a kiss in the movie, because at no point did it feel right. And that spoke to like we were all just so on the same page.
Then I surprised them.
Yeah, like literally. We were shooting that scene in the bus station. It was really, really freezing. Like there were buses pulling in and pulling out. I mean, the movie is so full of like. I mean, I'm proud of how few continuity issues there are, but like, you know, it was like a pretty intense situation. But they said goodbye, and Nick started walking away. And I was like, all right, like in my mind, this is it. And then Alexi just turned around and ran and kissed him. and then it worked. And so then we like had to, we did a few more takes.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I think that was really good. So that was the biggest and pretty much only piece that like radically changed.
Yeah.
But, you know, yeah.
Well, I want to remind everyone that this movie is going to be in theaters next weekend. They can check it out and spread the word. I want to thank you guys for being a great audience. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you